I'm Chris, you're watching FRAG-MENTAL. It's been a minute since I did a Perfume Parlour video. Actually, I think it's been 7 months, 9 days, 4 hours and 32 minutes, but that doesn't sound quite as cool. Anyway, this video is top 10 Tom Ford Perfume Parlour inspirations, and that just rolls off the tongue. Stay tuned. It's good to be back with another Perfume Parlour video. I haven't done one of these in a while and I know they're pretty popular. Perfume Parlour, if you don't know, very special brand to me because if it wasn't for them, I wouldn't have started my journey into niche fragrance. They were a gateway into niche for me. They gave me the opportunity to just smell lots of expensive fragrances. Some of them that I really loved from Perfume Parlour, I then went on to buy the original versions, in particular the Tom Ford Private Blend, which I absolutely love. I wouldn't love the Private Blend if it weren't for Perfume Parlour. I now own a few in my collection and I have a few Perfume Parlour interpretations of Tom Ford fragrances, and I've been meaning to do this video for a while. I love the Private Blend and I think Perfume Parlour do the Tom Ford Private Blend fragrances particularly well. So I thought I'd put together my top 10 Tom Ford Perfume Parlour inspirations. Perfume Parlour have been closed for a little while. They've recently just reopened. They're starting to take orders again. So I thought it was a good time to do this video. If you did want to make any purchases of any of the fragrances I talk about today, you will find an affiliate link in the description below. If you click through that link and make a purchase, it does not cost you any more money. I get a little bit of a kickback from that, which helps me to support the channel. I put the money right back into FRAG-MENTAL and it helps me to keep rolling out the content for you. So please don't feel obliged to use that link at all, but if you did, it really does help me out. Okay, let's get started. So I'm going to start at number 10, and the way I'm going to do this is each of the Perfume Parlour fragrances I have compared to the original Tom Fords. Some I have the bottles of, some I have samples of, but each one is compared directly with the original, and I've given each one a rating out of 5 based on how good an interpretation of the Tom Ford it is. Okay, so let's get started. The first one I want to talk about is one of my favourites from the blue fragrances that Tom Ford produced, and this one is Mandarino di Amalfi. The original Tom Ford version of this is such a beautiful summer fragrance, almost a photo-realistic mandarin note in there, and it's so bright and refreshing and invigorating. Not one of the longest lasting fragrances. Not all of the blue bottles in the Private Blend are, because they are more fresh fragrances, but I get reasonable performance off Mandarino di Amalfi. And now the Perfume Parlour version is pretty close. It's number 10 on the list because it isn't quite as close as some of the other Perfume Parlour interpretations, but in the air it's close enough. It's pretty close. It definitely nails the Mandarino di Amalfi DNA. If I'm nitpicking, I would say that the mandarin note in this one is not quite as photorealistic. It doesn't quite have the pop, and I feel like maybe the Tom Ford original is a little stronger, a little more potent. This one perhaps feels just slightly watered down, but not by a lot. And when you consider the prices of the Tom Ford fragrances compared to the Perfume Parlour, which generally the Private Blend for a 50ml you'll find for around somewhere between 150 and 180. That's pounds, but I think it's pretty similar in dollars. And the Perfume Parlour interpretations for the same quantity of 50ml, you'll be paying around £12–13, and that's pretty much the same across the board for all these Perfume Parlour interpretations. So when you factor in that big price difference, I think this Mandarino di Amalfi really does get that DNA. In the air it smells very, very similar, and if the cost of the original is a little bit too much for you, I think it's really well worth checking this one out. Overall, I give Perfume Parlour's version of Mandarino di Amalfi, which is called Italian Fruit, and the code on this one is 1134. This for me gets a 3 out of 5. So not one of the best ones, but not bad either. Number 9 is one of my favourite Tom Fords. It's one of the first ones that I ever smelled. So this one has quite a lot to live up to, and I've maybe been a little harsher in my critique of this because I do love the original so much. The original Tom Ford is Oud Wood. Perfume Parlour's version is called Golden Agar, and the code on this one is 0636. Oud Wood is a beautiful, spicy, oriental fragrance, dries down to a lovely vanilla. Now in the air, you do really pick up on the oud wood DNA. Absolutely, it is unmistakably oud wood. If I'm being harsh with this one, if I'm being very critical, I would say that this one isn't quite as smooth, almost has a grittier texture to it, and it doesn't quite have the same amount of depth as the original. But I do believe this is one of Perfume Parlour's best selling fragrances of any fragrance, not just of the Tom Ford inspiration. So many people out there do really rate this one, as do I. I think it's a fantastic interpretation. I think it gives you that oud wood vibe without having to spend a lot of money. I do prefer the original, but if you weigh up the cost of both, then that's up for you to decide. But I think it's a beautiful fragrance. Overall, I'm going to give Golden Agar a 3 out of 5. And just a note on the performance of this, I do get similar performance. The performance of oud wood is fine. It's around average. It's not an amazing performer, not one of the strongest performing private blend fragrances, but I would say the Perfume Parlour gives me a similar performance to the original. Number 8 is based on Tom Ford's Frickin' Fabulous. This one is called Extraordinary. The code on this is 1822. So the original Tom Ford's a beautiful fragrance. I don't own this one. I've had samples. I would like to own it at some point. It's kind of a creamy almond and leather fragrance. It's quite bold. It's quite assertive. Obviously caused a bit of controversy when it came out due to the name, which I've obviously not pronounced correctly on this video due to monetization reasons. But the Perfume Parlour version of this, I would say it's a little different. It gets the overall DNA, but it's a little lighter. It's not quite as heavy. I don't know whether it's perhaps less leather, but it's not quite as heavy. It's not quite as thick, as rich, but that's not a negative because I think the Perfume Parlour version has a little more mass appeal. The almond in this, I would say, if I'm nitpicking, isn't quite as creamy as in the original. Maybe the leather isn't there to the same degree, but I equally love both interpretations of this DNA. And I think if anything, the Perfume Parlour one is perhaps a little more versatile. So they both serve a slightly different purpose, but the Perfume Parlour interpretation is very nice, and overall I give this one a 4 out of 5. Number 7 is one of my absolute favourites from the private blend. It's got tobacco in it, that's why it's probably one of my favourites. And so this one is Tobacco Oud. And I love this fragrance because it's just a beautiful balance of a boozy whiskey note. There's some incense in there. You've got the tobacco, and then I get a little bit of an animalic hint to this one as well. The Perfume Parlour version is called Wood Leaf, and the code on this one is 0924. And in comparison to the Tom Ford, this one is a little lighter. I say you don't get that slight animalic hint that I get from the original. I love that in the original, but I don't mind that it's a little bit toned down on this. And I think a few people can find Tobacco Oud a little heavy. It tends to be one of the more divisive private blend fragrances. Maybe it's a little challenging for some people. So perhaps if you find the original Tobacco Oud a little challenging, then you might find the Perfume Parlour version a little more to your liking. So it's not quite as potent on the tobacco and on the incense. Where I do feel this goes a little further is the booziness. So I think the Perfume Parlour version is a little more leaning towards that boozy note, which is beautiful. So it's not quite as heavy as the original, but still a really nice interpretation. Performance on this one isn't quite as good for me as I get on the Tom Ford, probably due to the fact that it isn't quite as heavy a fragrance, so it doesn't quite last as long, but I still get a really good performance out of this. Overall, I give Wood Leaf a 4 out of 5. Number 6 is a Tom Ford fragrance that I don't hear talked about quite as much, but I really love this. I only discovered it quite recently, but I do need to get a bottle of this. It's called Oud Minerale, and Perfume Parlour's version is called Wood Substance, and the code is 1810. So this fragrance is a very marine-based fragrance. There's notes of kind of sea salt and seaweed. Now you might think seaweed wouldn't work in a fragrance. Why would you want to smell seaweed? But it just really works. There's something that draws me in about this fragrance. I can close my eyes and I can just imagine that I'm by the ocean somewhere, not crystal clear blue waters like you might get with one of the blue Tom Ford fragrances. This reminds me more of being on the English coastline. We used to go, or we still do go, to Anglesey in Wales a lot, and you're walking over the beaches when the tide's out and you're getting these smells of the seaweed and the rock pools that form. So it smells nicer than that. It's kind of got that running through it, but it's got some sweetness to it as well. And it's a really diffusive fragrance. It's got a lot of lift. I think this is a beautiful fragrance and a very unique fragrance. The Perfume Parlour version, I would say, if I'm nitpicking, it's not quite as potent as the original, but it's really not far off. And as with a lot of these, in the air, it just smells exactly the same. And I would also say that the performance is just not quite there as with the original. But when you factor in the massive price difference between this and the Tom Ford, it kind of cancels it out, really. So I love this fragrance. I do need a bottle of the Tom Ford. Again, it's on my to buy list. This only just missed out on being a 5 out of 5 in terms of how close it is to the Tom Ford original. I think Perfume Parlour did a great job with this. So 4 out of 5. Number 5 is based on Tom Ford's Amber Absolute. Perfume Parlour's version is called Tertiary Complete. Another catchy name there, Perfume Parlour. And the code on this one is 0797. Amber Absolute is such a rich and complex smelling fragrance. It's really smooth. It's so indulgent and sensual. Amazingly composed fragrance. Now, Perfume Parlour really surprised me with this because Amber Absolute from Tom Ford, I don't know how many naturals are in there, but it does smell really natural and really well blended. But Perfume Parlour, at the costs they're selling this for, have created something that to me is just as good quality. I would say, comparing the two, that the original is maybe a little more, again, I get a little more of that animalic accord. This one less so. I would say overall the Perfume Parlour is a little smoother, perhaps not quite the same amount of depth as the original, but it does have smoothness that the original doesn't have. So I think it is even more rounded. So a slightly different interpretation, only tiny amounts. It does smell very similar. I love both interpretations, but I just think Perfume Parlour did such a great job at bringing a fragrance that probably isn't that natural, but it does smell really natural for such a low price, which is £13. So I'm so impressed with this. I give it a 5 out of 5. Number 4 is another blue one. This time it's the very popular Neroli Portofino. So this is a gorgeously elegant, soapy, refreshing summer type scent. This gets criticised for its performance, and yeah, you know, it's a freshie, so it doesn't last as long as some of the heavier fragrances, but put this on a nice, warm, sunny day and it's just beautiful to wear. I never tire of this. And I don't think the performance is bad. I don't get a bad performance. It just doesn't last as long as some of the other heavier fragrances. Perfume Parlour's interpretation is called Seville Genoa, and the code on this one is 0628. Not too much to say about this other than it just nails it. It really gets that DNA. I don't think it's a particularly complex fragrance, so I think it probably is a very easy scent to copy. This often gets compared to a very cheap fragrance called 4711. The problem with that one is I haven't tried it myself, but a lot of people claim that it lasts about 5 minutes. So maybe you get an hour out of that, whereas this does last longer. But the Perfume Parlour version of Neroli Portofino lasts longer than the Perfume Parlour. Not by a lot, but it's a little stronger and lasts a little longer. So it feels like it's a slightly higher concentration, but it just gets that gorgeous, quite simple, refreshing, elegant DNA of the original. And for that, this one has to get a 5 out of 5. Number 3 is another tobacco fragrance. This time it's Tobacco Vanille, one of the most popular private blend fragrances. Some people say it's a bit too much, it's a bit too loud a smell, but I love it, and it's one of the first Tom Ford private blends I smelled. So I bought a decant and not finished that yet, but when I do, hopefully I'll be able to get a bottle, because I think it's a gorgeous scent. It just uses spices really well with resinous tobacco and the vanilla. The smell of it reminds me of, you know, the Portuguese tarts, the pastel de natas? It just reminds me of one of those, the pastry, the kind of custard, the vanilla smell of those. I love eating one of those with a cup of coffee. A little bit of an indulgence, but every now and then, absolutely amazing. Sitting on the balcony of the villa in Portugal, eating one of those mid-morning with a cup of coffee, doesn't get much better. Anyway, I'm going off on a tangent. This Perfume Parlour version is called Leaf Flavour, and their code on that is 0401. I would say this is very, very close. I think it's a great interpretation. I think the original is a little bit more resinous, so I think you notice the tobacco just a little bit more when you're just smelling close in on skin. But again, in the air, the difference really is negligible. I would say that the performance of the Perfume Parlour one is a little better. I think it's a little stronger. I was trying these out again yesterday, testing the original on one arm and this on the other, and the Perfume Parlour one was smelling stronger and lasting a little bit longer as well. So you can't really complain at that. At Perfume Parlour's prices, to be able to offer a scent that seems to, in my opinion, be a little bit better than the original, then I just think they've done a great job, and for that reason it gets a 5 out of 5. I know I'm saying I do want the Tom Ford original. Why would I want that when this one is so good? I have a collection and I just love those Tom Ford bottles, so I just need to add it to the rest of them. Simple as that. But yeah, 5 out of 5 for this one. Excellent, excellent interpretation. In the number 2 spot is a fragrance that is probably my favourite of the Tom Ford private blend, although it fluctuates daily between this one and Oud Wood. I guess you could just say I enjoy both equally depending on what mood I'm in. So I smelled this around the same time as Oud Wood, as Tobacco Vanille, but this one is a little bit more of an assault on the sense of smell. It was a little more unexpected for me, so it blew my mind. I'm talking about Tuscan leather. So the profile of this fragrance is essentially a fruity raspberry note with a lovely leather note. It's the leather note in here that I think can make this a little bit divisive. And many people say it smells like the leather on the inside of a luxury sports car, and I kind of get that. So it's a lovely composition, really well balanced fragrance, a little bit divisive. Not everyone likes this, but I don't care about that. The fact that I love Tuscan leather so much just cancels all that out, and I just adore this every time I wear it. So basically, I wear it for myself and I don't care what anyone else thinks when they smell it. The Perfume Parlour version is called Italian Rawhide. The code on that is 0688. I've been mentioning the codes of these fragrances because some people like to have the code. They find it a little easier just to go into the search box on Perfume Parlour's website, type in the code, it'll come up with your fragrance. But you can also type in the actual Perfume Parlour name or the name of the original fragrance and it'll come up with whatever you're looking for. So compared to the Tom Ford, this is very, very close. There's barely any difference to my nose. I claim to be no expert. Other people out there may detect more of a difference than me, but personally for me, I barely detect anything. If I'm really scrutinising it, the Tom Ford is maybe just a touch sweeter and a little bit more potent, but there's barely anything in it. Both are beautiful fragrances. In terms of performance, the Perfume Parlour matches the original and they both perform very well for me. It's quite a bold, strong scent, so it's not a fragrance you do want to overspray. Some people say that the original formulation of Tuscan leather, I believe it's changed a little bit, was even bolder and even stronger than this one. I find this pretty strong, so maybe the original would have been a bit too strong. Who knows? This one works for me anyway. So from Perfume Parlour, Italian Rawhide from me gets a 5 out of 5. So if Oud Wood isn't in the top spot and Tuscan leather isn't in the top spot, what could it be? The fragrance that has made it to my number 1 is, for me, just just about the Perfume Parlour interpretation that is the closest to the original. For me, this is bang on. I couldn't tell you the difference. On skin, on paper, in the air, for me, it's just the same. Performance of the Perfume Parlour one, again, matches the original. This is a very sensual fragrance. It's a chocolate rose fragrance. Reminds me a little bit of Turkish Delight. Very, very sensual scent. I'm talking about Noir de Noir, and Perfume Parlour's version is called Black Extreme, and the code on that is 0645. Noir de Noir is perhaps not for every guy out there. I think it's a very unisex fragrance. A lot of guys maybe think the rose is too much. I don't like it when a rose is too much or if it leans too feminine. So for me, Noir de Noir definitely doesn't do that. I think it's a lovely, soft fragrance that can equally be carried off by a man as it can be a woman, and I think it's a very sensual, sexy fragrance as well. So whilst it's right up there in terms of my favourite Tom Ford private blend, it's definitely top 5. In terms of the Perfume Parlour interpretation, this is the one that is the closest. Bang on. What more can I say? Obviously, it gets a 5 out of 5. If you've never smelled Noir de Noir and you're wondering, is it for you or is it not, then try the Perfume Parlour version because it will give you a very good idea. You smell this, you're smelling the Tom Ford, basically. I mainly buy these little 13mm sprayers, which are around £5, I think, so not very much at all. Great way to not only discover Tom Fords, but discover many niche fragrances that you wouldn't otherwise have a chance to get samples of or go into a store and sample. So whilst I love all these 10 fragrances that I've talked about in this video, to me, Noir de Noir is the best interpretation of a Tom Ford private blend. Okay, so there we go, that's the list. If you're interested in Perfume Parlour, I hope this video was of some use to you. And I don't know if you know, but Perfume Parlour are the reason that I started my YouTube channel. I was really discovering the brand and I was loving their fragrances, but I really wanted to know how close they were to the originals. So I started to search for videos online on YouTube. Couldn't find very much, so I thought maybe I should be the one to start putting videos out there. So that's where it all began for me. So I always love making Perfume Parlour videos because I know there's people that are out there, like I was, searching for this kind of information. Let me know if there are any Tom Ford interpretations that I've not mentioned on this list. Maybe I've not tried them, so if there's some brilliant ones out there, I would love to hear your thoughts. Also, let me know what you think about all the 10 I included in here because it's useful for everybody else watching this video as well. Alright, that's it from me. I hope you enjoyed the video. I hope you found it useful. Thank you very much for watching. Remember, keep tuning into FM and keep smelling good.